So welcome to day 4 of our 5th week of continually during every weekday coming together at this time, whatever time it is for you, to actually be together and practice mindfulness together, cultivate mindfulness together. And it's really kind of remarkable gesture on everybody's part, to no matter where we are in the world, to come together in this way and remind ourselves and rebody ourselves, if you will, by the very gesture of dropping into the present moment. And you wouldn't be doing this in the midst of this pandemic and what we're calling our mitigation retreat together if there wasn't something deep within you that knew that this was profoundly nurturing and helpful in dealing with all of the vast trauma that we're experiencing individually and as neighborhoods and as societies and as nations and as a global phenomenon. And so I just want to offer my profound bows to each and every one of you for doing this, for coming together in this way. At the same time, if we were on a regular kind of retreat together, which is the kind I usually lead and all of which have been canceled, first of all, there would not be room enough for the 2,000 people that are usually joining between Zoom and YouTube. So you see, we're all in the same room, but the room is as wide as the human heart, and the room is as big as the world. And if the retreat was going to go on for this long, I mean, I have not usually led retreats that are, sort of this kind of a length, although certainly I've sat retreats that are far longer than 5 weeks, but that's 24/7, 7 days a week. But there comes a time at which, even walking into the meditation hall and seeing people sitting, and you've signed up to do it, there's a certain kind of resistance, and the thought might come up in the mind, oh no, not another sitting. Couldn't we have some other kind of entertainment to keep us engaged? So, of course, that's not the case now because you've all entered this room on purpose, and you didn't have to. Whereas if you're on retreat, the kind of feeling is that you have to, if you're in a meditation center. And the way I run the ship, you do have to. I mean, we're not kidding around, and it's a highly disciplined engagement. But that thought, oh no, not another meditation, or no, oh no, not another, sitting, or oh no, there is some kind of resistance to our dropping in sometimes. And I want to really acknowledge it and honor it because it's just a thought, but sometimes it really prevents us from being present. And maybe prevents us from actually getting our butt on the cushion or in the chair and establishing ourselves in this kind of formal, formal way to put the welcome mat out for the actuality of life unfolding as we simplify, because this is like gross simplification. We're creating laboratory conditions for investigating the nature of our own minds and the nature of our own stress reactivity. And what could be better in a time like this one where we are in such a domain of uncertainty and of trauma and of grief and of loss and of economic, sort of disaster. And so let's actually establish ourselves formally in a posture that embodies wakefulness and dignity. We're going to be shutting off the chat if we haven't done so already. And just, of course, that doesn't mean the chat in your head will shut off. The chat in your head is a whole other challenge. And the important thing is to not try to shut it off or shut it out, but basically let it stream through without necessarily being captured by it. Or if you are, then noticing that and just coming back to the present moment. And any anchor for your attention that helps you be in the present moment is fine. The sense of the body as a whole, sitting and breathing is what we've mostly been using, but you can use sounds, you can use, sense of your feet on the floor if you're sitting in that kind in a chair, anything. So dropping in. Eyes open is fine. Also, eyes closed is fine. And seeing if you can just be here with no agenda other than to be awake and to appreciate the universe of your body right here in this moment. And then resting in awareness itself, moment by moment by moment, breath by breath by breath. Falling awake. And again, I'll say this for newcomers, but I guess it is valuable for all of us. If there's any sense in which you are telling yourself that you're meditating, and turning it into some kind of special activity. See if you can just, as best you can, drop that whole suitcase and just sit here. Let's face it, I mean, you are just sitting here or lying here. Breath is going on, hearing is going on, seeing is going on, whether you have your eyes open or closed. Thinking is going on, emotions are going on of all kinds. So the moment couldn't be more ordinary. And let's not try to make it special by thinking that the meditation, in some sense, is going to do something for us. But rather that our intentionality and our attention together, so our intention and our attention, uh, in some sense, invite us and allow us to just be here without any of the baggage, even the meditation baggage that we carry so much of the time. To just be here and bathe in the unfolding of experience as it arises in awareness. Whether it's weather patterns in the mind, storms, turbulence, calmness, clarity, whether it's sounds that are, say, unpleasant and make you feel like, oh, I can't meditate because they're making so much noise, or pleasant sounds that we might get attached to and want to hear more of and get carried away by the birds or music from afar or whatever. So instead, the invitation is to simply be here. To rest in awareness with huge intentionality and at the same time effortlessly. No striving, a non-doing. A dropping into being. And letting everything arise, emerge, come to you in awareness, because that's the only place any experience can arise. Or it's not really an experience. So this immediately frees you from all the baggage that is associated with meditation practice, often that it's all about getting someplace else instead of really an invitation to be where you already are and as you already are, but to be all of who you are and the mystery of that, because we're so much bigger than who we tell ourselves we are, the narratives that we generate about how great we are or how terrible we are, or how unworthy or wounded or anything. And all those narratives may be true to a degree, but they're not true enough. They're not complete enough. You're already whole. And you always have been, no matter how many scars life has subjected you to. And even in this present moment of such huge tumult and uncertainty and tragedy and trauma and pain and loss and fear, this is exactly the time where we most don't want to lose our minds. But have the full dimensionality of our minds and hearts available to us moment by moment, 24/7, if you will, with the lightest of touches, and at the same time, so no efforting, and at the same time with the motivation that everything depends on it, and not just your life, but in some very real way, all life. Because when you are your best self in some sense, or tapping into your truest nature, because of the profundity of interconnectedness of reality, the world is already different. You might think it's in some small and insignificant way, and small it may be, but it is hardly insignificant. The world needs all its flowers, and you're flowering right now. And now. And now. And you can't help it in the same way as you can't help breathing. I mean, that's the core of your being human, the core of all of us, every single one of us being human. But when we forget, we actually go unconscious, lose our minds. And then often compound whatever pain and suffering is already here with our own self-centeredness and anxiety. Am I saying this is easy? No. Really, really, mindfulness is absolutely the hardest work in the world for us human beings, although it's not work, and we should think of it more as play. Why it's so challenging to be fully embodied and present and wakeful is a really interesting question. But the fact of the matter is that it's available to us in any moment that we remember and drop in. And inhabit the full dimensionality of who you are, underneath the narratives and the pronouns. And we're going to need this kind of wisdom, this kind of arduous commitment to clarity, to well-being, to non-harming, to the recognition of our interconnectedness. We're going to need it big time in the coming days, weeks, months, years, decades, if we even have decades. And so this quiet sitting here may seem like nothing, but it just might turn out to be pretty much everything. Looks like nothing from the outside, but this non-doing is not nothing. It's not doing nothing. It's wakefulness itself, emerging in the form of you, us. And a potential source of never-ending learning. And out of that learning, really stretching our own envelopes and growing, even in the face of the full catastrophe of the human condition, especially in the face of the full catastrophe of the human condition. And out of that growing healing, which in my working definition is really coming to terms with the actuality of things, with things as they are. And out of this coming to terms, right in this timeless moment, transformation simply emerges. What I call an orthogonal rotation in consciousness. Big words, but everybody has had the experience of like, all of a sudden, nothing has changed and everything has changed. When we wake up, it's the same old world. It's driven by the same old elements and factors of greed, hatred, delusion, and so forth, and also kindness and compassion. And how the balance works out is always unclear. So it's the same old world, and yet by virtue of your embodied wakefulness right in this moment, everything's different. And the future is open. And when you walk into it, or even one step into this moment of now from the last out-breath, the field of possibilities is enormous because you've inhabited this moment fully in awareness. And it's really the only leverage we have on changing the future is to show up in the present. And so our showing up day by day and week by week in this time of huge uncertainty and turmoil is a kind of, as I've been stressing from the very beginning, radical act of sanity, of love, and of true compassion, because we're not merely doing this for ourselves or to just get through a rough patch. And we're tapping as best we can into the infinite wells of our own creativity and imagination for how to live in a way that optimizes beauty, let's say, and well-being and insight and clarity and compassion, taking care of what and who needs taking care of. And at the same time, it all flowering out of this moment, this timeless moment. Underneath thought, before thinking arises. Pure awareness, embodied, aware of our interconnectedness, aware of our intrinsic spaciousness that could be called selflessness. A radical act of love in the end. Right here, right now. And since there's only right here and right now, as I've been saying from time to time, I won't ring the bells. We can gradually invite our eyes to open, but maintaining as best we can embodied wakefulness, even as things get more complex, as the field of vision comes into it. And then life itself is the meditation practice. There's no breaks, there's no discontinuities, there's no end to it. Yeah, can we go unconscious? Big time. Can we cause harm even in our families or the people we love the most? Big time. Okay, but this is part of the curriculum. It's part of the mirroring back to us of the world. Like, hey, what is really most important here? And each one of us, as I said, is essential to this calculus. There's nobody that's left out or extraneous or less than or inadequate. Yeah, we might all think we are, but that's part of the disease of thinking and the dis-ease of thinking. And it's really, a form of major suffering until we liberate ourselves from it. And then in no time, it's not a problem, no matter how disturbing and tumultuous your thinking and your emotions and your reactions to what's going on at the moment or are. So we're going to stop here and, as we've been doing, enter into a period of time for questions and dialogue. And then I want to say a few things just before we do. One is, you'll notice I'm dressed slightly differently today, and that's because I have to actually leave you 10 minutes before we ordinarily would, and I will not be able to take part in the small groups today because had there not been a pandemic, I was going to be giving psychiatry grand rounds at Stanford, and I agreed to do it remotely even though I'm not in California. So I have to give another talk, which is why I've kind of changed uniforms a little bit. But don't forget that if you can, we're going to, as usual, break up as we do on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the second hour into groups of about 7 and have a dialogue together about what this is all about, what this means to us, how hard it really is to practice, but why are we even here together to practice? And all of this, believe me, I may look like I am the kind of person who's talking most of the time and guiding the meditations and everything, but we're all teaching each other by virtue of showing up here. There's not one teacher here. I'm playing taking a certain kind of role on to have developed this whole, sort of gathering. But make no mistake about it, whether it's an MBSR class with 30 people in it or this kind of online virtual, sort of gathering, certainly wouldn't call it a class, but of 2,000 people or whatever it is, every single one of us is the teacher. And every single one of us is a student. And the curriculum is nothing other than what's here now, life itself, pandemic and all. So I will say, just wave goodbye, but you can stay and Soren will hold the space and tell you everything you need to know about migrating to the small groups and so forth. But I will sort of just click leave the meeting at 10:02 and then try to find my other meeting and figure out what the hell I'm going to say there.
And be back tomorrow with us.
And absolutely be back tomorrow. That will complete our 5th week. And then on Monday, it will be May. By the way, tomorrow's May 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will, continue into May. And as we move into like this very uncertain thing in different countries about when they're going to reduce the social distancing and what's going to happen when we do and all of that kind of thing, we have no idea what's going to go on. And it's total chaos in the United States. And really, I mean, it's like the centripetal forces are just huge, and the degree of suffering just in my country is unimaginable. The degree of corruption is in our faces and totally unimaginable. I mean, except that it's happening and it's very imaginable. So that's just to say, maybe we're the most reliable thing going on the planet at the moment. It's just like we can count on, for now at least, and I'll keep stressing for now, coming together in this way when you care to, if you care to. But I think Soren and I are in it for the indeterminate distance. This is a marathon that doesn't have a finish line. Okay.
If you have a question, there's a participant tab below. You'll see a pop-up on the right, I believe, at least on the desktop, and there's a way to raise your hand. So if you click raise your hand, you pop up in our view to see whose hand's raised. And we just kind of pick randomly, so there's no
don't take it personally if
there's
you
no
don't. You keep putting your hand up, and I wish we could just take everybody's.
But over the next time, maybe we will get to more and more people.
And we're monitoring YouTube too, just so you know, so that we're trying as much as we can to have it be one seamless whole of a community.
I'm seeing Lindsay Deitch.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where are you calling from, and what's your question or comment? Please go ahead.
I'm calling from the Czech Republic, but I'm originally from Los Angeles. Well, thank you for calling me. I feel very emotional, just that I've had my hand raised for a while. And my question, which you mentioned today in the meditation, you always say that we're already whole and complete, and that there's more, as long as we're breathing, that there's more right with us than wrong. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that, and because I have this, story in my head that I'm not whole, and I, all these, what you mentioned before, and I was, I guess, wondering if you could talk more about that and how meditation could help with those, negative beliefs that so many of us have.
Yeah, well, this is its own kind of virus or pandemic or plague or epidemic, this sort of narrative of how I'm not whole, how there's something wrong with me. Whether it's, a sense of inadequacy, a sense of never being recognized, or, not accepted for who we were as children unless we behaved a certain way, or were somebody that we weren't and we couldn't do that. And so it's a pandemic. So welcome to the club. It's not like, you're by yourself there. And of course, that is the cardinal agenda of psychotherapy. is to actually, enter into a kind of therapeutic relationship that can actually help you to recognize your wholeness and your beauty. And there are many different therapeutic approaches like that. Meditation is very different in a very profound way. It's like very often therapy recognizes that, you have a diagnosis, there's something wrong with you, there's some, but we don't pay any attention to diagnoses. I mean, the only diagnosis I'm interested in is that you're human. And so it's almost like axiomatic that the approach here is that, when you were born, were you okay? When did it happen that you weren't okay? I mean, you look at babies, the miracle that any of us ever come out whole, given how complex it is to even have a body that works. So, your wholeness is really not a kind of hypothesis. It's an axiom. It's the kind of the nature of life, that you couldn't be more whole than you already are. And the question is, can you actually recognize it in yourself? And the trouble is that along the trajectory of growing up, we often have a steady diet of negativity that comes at us in one way or another, very often from the outside, but then we internalize a lot of it. And then it becomes a burden, and it gets heavier and heavier the more we stuff into. Robert Bly's wonderful American poet used to talk about it as a kind of a black bag that everybody's born with when you're born. And then over time, when people tell you how you're not good enough, you stuff different aspects of yourself into the black bag. So you take all the most beautiful, wonderful things aspects of you that other people can't see and don't love, and say, if only you were different, you'd be lovable or better or whatever. And you stuff it all. And then by the time you're 30 or 40, the way he put it was like, your black bag is a mile long, and it gets stuck in the elevator doors when you walk in, because you're trailing something that's extremely heavy and that turns toxic because it can't breathe. It doesn't have air. It's repressed in a certain way. And then it comes up in the form of all sorts of, negative feelings about yourself. This is the root of, by the way, of depression and anxiety. These are disorders of thinking. And mindfulness-based approaches to either anxiety or depression don't start with this sort of narrative of when your parents first met and what went wrong along the way, why you're hopelessly the way you are. It starts with this moment. And just what you said, quoting me, that from our perspective in MBSR, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. You can think all you want about what's wrong with you. And sometimes it's true. I mean, we're born with metabolic problems, with medical problems, with physical problems, with all sorts of things. But from a non-dual perspective, which I've been talking about if you've been around for a while, from a non-dual perspective, there's no slicing and dicing of perfection. It's like a hologram. The more you cut it, the more it's still whole. And so are you. So I won't go into it in any more detail. I've written about it in all sorts of books. But I think the most important thing between you and me is we're connecting right now, between wherever you are in the Czech Republic and where I am in the United States. The you that is aware of your body sitting and breathing when we're formally practicing the mindfulness. Is there anything wrong with that you?
Well, to me, there's a lot of anxiety when I'm practicing.
Okay,
and
yeah,
I feel like that's wrong.
Who knows that there's a lot of anxiety?
Just me. Just
No,
me.
no, not so fast. There's anxiety, right? That arises. Uh, do you feel it in your body? How do you know
Yeah,
that you're anxious? Where do you feel it?
and my chest,
Okay, so
usually.
what kinds of sensations are they?
Like a tightness, and it feels hard to breathe. It feels like I'm not even
Uh-huh.
breathing enough, like not
Okay.
getting enough
And
air.
has this been a picture that's been part of your life for a long time?
Hmm.
And do certain kind of external events trigger it?
Yeah, definitely.
And do certain kind of internal thoughts trigger it?
Hmm.
Okay. And how do you know all this that you've just reported to me? How do you know that? Who, I'm deadly serious here. Who knows when there's a moment of anxiety arising? Who is that?
I mean, I would say myself, but then that's the issue of
Yeah,
the
you see the
self,
problem.
right?
Okay,
Yes.
okay. But there is some function that's part of the universe of you that is knowing of what's going on. So you can investigate now in your own life and in your own meditation practice. Is my awareness of my arising anxiety and the contraction in my chest and the rapidity of the heartbeat or the thoughts in the mind that say I'm not good enough or whatever it is, the narrative, is your awareness of that, those sensations and emotions and thoughts, is your awareness of that anxious? And I don't want you to ask it to respond right away. I want you to investigate for yourself. Is your awareness actually like buying into your narrative? Or is it just another movie that you could choose to actually walk out of instead of the thought that keeps you in the theater, this is my life and I can't help it. Whereas, something brought you to this. What brought you to our gathering here?
I found out about it from another center in Los Angeles, inside LA. They do, yeah, they're just in
Yeah,
a
I know the
meditation
folks
center.
at Inside LA.
Yeah, and then somewhere they posted that this was happening.
No,
So
but that doesn't tell me what I'm asking. So there on
um,
some website you saw that this was happening, but there are a billion things happening on websites. Why did you click on this and stay?
well, I've read your book, the Mindful Way Through Depression.
Okay.
And that was, well, I mean, I know you co-wrote it with other people,
Yeah.
but I found that really, really helpul. And I also have Wherever You Go, There You Are, but I
Okay.
have
So
not
who
finished
who
it.
who found? Don't worry about that. There's no finishing. Who 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 even found those books? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm pointing to something, and that is I'm pointing to who you truly, truly are, to that aspect of you that couldn't not be whole. And yet we put that aside or ignore it, and then we build this gigantic narrative that has a lot of momentum behind it. It has a lot of force behind it. And it's kind of like you're locked into a thought storm or a bad movie that you're the script is the screenwriter. And instead, what we're doing is stepping back and just watching the show, and the thoughts will arise that say that you're like whatever the thoughts say about you. But when you drop into being the knowing in awareness of what's unfolding on the screen of your mind, then all bets are off about living with anxiety and depression for the rest of your life. As I said, they are diseases of thought. And when you're practicing either mindfulness-based anxiety reduction or mindfulness-based depression, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for major depression, the as soon as you see that these are thoughts, the seeing function, the knowing function is so much bigger than those thoughts that the thoughts lose their power to keep perpetuating the sort of hole that you dig for yourself. So, and it doesn't take you, it doesn't have to take 30 years or 30 minutes. In fact, right now, you know, I can see it. I mean, you're so much more than what you're carrying at the moment that you're suffering from. And the world needs you to actually like wake up to how much, you know, you're depriving yourself and everybody else of your beauty. I mean, it's just, it's a total waste. And it doesn't have to take a long time by the clock. All you need to do is sort of be here and as you are and practice as you are, and then be patient, okay? And not be attached to an outcome of like, oh, now I'm not depressed anymore. Bullshit, okay? Don't tell yourself another narrative about how great mindfulness is and then blah, blah, blah about mindfulness. No, I'm asking you to be, inviting you to just be real. And do you remember the poem that I recited a number of days ago, Love After Love? You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to yourself. And then he says to the stranger who has loved you all your life, you know, I mean, somebody loves you, you know, cares for you, but maybe you don't. Who you have ignored for another. You're ignoring your true self for this narrative about how inadequate you are in some way or another, how damaged. And then the invitation is to, the last line, sit, feast on your life. It's not about meditation, but it's about taking your seat in your life. The time will come when with elation, that means great happiness, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. So that's a practice. It's not a poem. It's an invitation to get, I'm at a loss for words, to love yourself. Not in some kind of self-centered, narcissistic way, but to actually realize that, I think I said, the world needs all its flowers. You know, you're one. You're one. Thanks, Lindsay. I hope that's been helpful. But, you know, what I mean in this dialogue is for this moment to actually not be forgettable. Okay? Not because of me, but because you asked the question and you got your hand up and you had been putting your hand up, if I heard you correctly, for quite some number of days. Mm-hmm. The you that put your hand up to ask this question has nothing wrong with them, is not damaged, is beautiful, is not anxious, is not depressed, there's nothing wrong with you. So, you know, how wonderful is that? So keep up the practice as if your life depended on it. It does. And even when chronic anxiety or depression is in the rearview mirror, that it's not going to solve all life problems. There's going to be, you know, there'll still be the pandemic. There'll still be everything else. There'll still be, what are you going to do with your life, or what are you doing, or this or that. There's always like stress, pain, and illness. It's not like we're going to get rid of it. The question is, how are we going to be in wise relationship to it in the only moment any of us is ever alive? And what we're cultivating is a kind of understanding that we have more degrees of freedom, more dimensions of our humanity than we're taught in school or in our families of origin. where we're expected to be a certain way or we're rejected. I'm not blaming this on your family, by the way. I don't know you from Adam and I have no idea what, but whatever the causes and conditions are, you remember a number of days ago, I spoke about this. Causes and conditions is kind of like sort of Buddhist language, but it's like the stuff out there that, sort of drives actions and reactions and so forth, but they're not completely operational in the domain of wakefulness because we don't care about the causes and conditions. We can be happy in the midst of unhappiness, and we can act out of compassion in the midst of madness and horror, and not lose our minds when we most need them, and not lose our hearts when we most need them.
John, I'm gonna just
Yep.
Lindsay, do you have 30
this
seconds or
one
anything,
question.
anything to that in
Yeah.
response? And I know John has
Because I have to go and give a talk.
anything.
I'd much rather stay and be with you.
Want to say before? Is there any last words you want to say, Lindsay, before John leaves?
Just thank you. Really, I'm truly touched.
Good luck. And if we're here in another month, you can raise your hand and report back how things are going, because it's all a process. It's kind of a big adventure. And let me just say, because that's the only question we're going to get to today. I think I've said this before, but the beauty of this kind of dialogue like this is, like, I'm guessing, even without going to gallery mode and asking, that what Lindsay just brought up is not her problem, and everybody else is like, hey, never heard of that one before. Everybody's carrying that kind of sense of being hampered by our own feelings of self-torture, lack of self-worth or regard. None of it's true. So welcome to the club, as I said. And you can report back in 4 or 5 weeks about how your practice is going. And have fun. Are you in Prague?
Which is like 2.5 hours from Prague.
Okay. Well, have fun there. As long as you're there, you might as well